Welcome to the 12th episode of Oblivion Good Content. In this episode, I'll be looking at the famous removed city of Oblivion, Sutch. At first, I was hesitant to cover this topic because, well, it's Sutch. Most people know about it and there are already enough videos about it online. I didn't just want to regurgitate info that's easy to find. However, I decided to cover the topic for completion's sake, and because I found some other worthwhile stuff, small as it may be. Now, before we take a look at the remains of the city in Oblivion, we'll need to go back a bit, to before Oblivion got released. More specifically, we're going back to the release of the Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard. Redguard was a spin-off title released in 1998 in between Daggerfall and Morrowind. There was a map shown multiple times in-game that depicted part of Western Tamriel. This map shows us some places in the Imperial Province such as Kvatch, Skingrad, Anvil and most importantly, Sutch. This seems to be the first ever mention for some of these places, Sutch included of course. Now, with Redguard done, the Bethesda team started to work on Morrowind. And as you likely know all too well, there's not much talk of the cities in Cyrodiil to be found in Morrowind. That would change when Oblivion hit store shelves, since the team would now have to focus on Cyrodiil's world and world building. Well, they focused on its world at least. Of course, before Oblivion would be finished, Todd Howard unleashed its quote-unquote greatness to the masses at E3 2005. Many fans have since then noted that we start off with a different menu screen than the final Oblivion, which is completely true. Something that I never hear anyone mention though is that this early menu screen still exists and can be rewatched in the game files in its full glory. While it's only shown briefly here, we can clearly see the basic layout of the city of Sutch, in the similarly named County Sutch. The city's representation on maps is basically all we know about how it would have looked. Still, it might have looked different had it been included in the final game, since it seems that Cyrodiil's cities got reduced by the time of release. I mean, besides Sutch, we can also see Kvatch, Skingrad, the Imperial City and Cheydinhal. All of these look different from their final game counterparts, some having more obvious differences than others. The thing that's the most notable about Sutch is that the city seems to be directly connected to a lake of some sort. What purpose this would have served is lost to me, but we'll come back to that in a bit. First, we're going back to the E3 video, as Todd also shows us some fast traveling, and we can't fast travel without looking at a map. This is interesting as it seems to be the map seen in the preview video, but now fully adjusted for gameplay. However, something seems a bit off here. If you look very closely, you may see it. Did you see it? I doubt it, because it's very easy to miss. If we'll slow the footage down a bit, you may see that Coral has the fast travel icon for a city. And apparently so does Waynham Priory. That's no problem to me. Skingrad also has a city icon, and so does Kvatch. Then underneath Kvatch is another city icon, which I can only presume would have marked Dasek Moor. Dasek Moor in the final game is a fort that's mislabeled on the map as a mine, but here the name seems to be used in order to mark a specific region or waypoint. It also doesn't seem to spell Dasek Moor, but rather Dasok Moor. It's possible that this region would have had a smaller city in it as well, which was later removed, but since nothing remains of it, I can't even really begin to speculate. We can also see Anvil, which uses the city icon as well, and the name Brina Cross is also visible on the map. Keep that in the back of your heads. The most important thing though is that we can see Sutch as fast travel marker for a split second if you look very closely. Every marker we've seen up to this point has been a city marker. But the city of Sutch doesn't have one. Instead, it uses a fort map marker. This is very interesting to me, as it basically says that Bethesda had either already scrapped Sutch as a city by this point, or they were already planning to do it soon, leaving the fort marker as a sort of reminder. Now, can I confirm any of this? Of course not, but it does make sense if you think about how little remains of the city in the final game's files. And speaking about the final game, of course, we don't have the really big cities. And we most certainly don't have Sutch, neither the county nor the city. So where did it all go? Well, that's kinda hard to say. As far as I'm aware, none of the developers have ever commented on why or how Sutch was exactly removed. Though I'm inclined to say that based on what we know, it's possible that the developers struggled with disk space and they decided to remove one of their least finished or least implemented cities, which just happened to be Sutch. Maybe in a parallel universe, Oblivion shipped with the city of Sutch, but with a Fort Breville. Let's reiterate for a moment. We don't really know what any of Sutch would have looked like. There's no remaining textures, models, descriptions, or anything of the sort, not even in the form of concept art. We only know of a basic layout which you can infer from the map we saw at E3. I can't really go into specifics of its layout, but it seemed to be roughly the same size as the early Skingrad, both cities notably being smaller than the early Kvatch, at least on the map. The most notable thing about Sutch though, its connection to a lake, is now going to get confusing as we delve into the in-game leftovers. There's only a single cell that still refers to the old Sutch leftover, and that cell is known as County Sutch Docks Exterior. This cell is actually used in the game, but as you could have guessed, it doesn't contain any docks of any sort. It does contain a river that leads out to the Abyssinian Sea, so that's something. The cell is also located to the west of where the city of Sutch was originally located on the E3 map. And while I can't confirm this, it's possible that the walkway with the lake that was northeast of the city on the map was eventually reworked into these docks with the walkway intended to go from the docks to the city itself. Oh yeah, the city. Almost forgot about that. Well, that's because there really isn't that much to tell. Nothing of the city itself remains. After it got cut, Bethesda decided to haphazardly place a random fort in its place. This fort is of course known as Fort Sutch. The usual generic fort in Oblivion has one exterior cell and one interior cell. Fort Sutch has 4 exterior cells. We have Fort Sutch Exterior, then Fort Sutch Exterior 02, which is just an empty space of grasslands in the final game, despite still playing dungeon music. But more interestingly, we also have a Fort Sutch Abbey Exterior and Fort Sutch Castle Exterior. Neither a Fort Sutch Abbey nor a Fort Sutch Castle exist. But these cell names indicate that the original Fort Sutch was intended to be a way bigger dungeon, or at least a way bigger location. This would make sense seeing as the original city was a lot bigger than the fort they just popped in there later on. You can still basically see the exact dimensions of the city if you look at the area in the final game. Everything around the fort is barren and flat, the sign of a quick cover-up. If we look at the leftover borders from the city and look at how close Lord Dread's estate is located to them, we can get an idea of how much the original Cyrodiil map was compressed. However, that basically brings us to the end of the Sutch debate, at least in the way of location and layout. There is a single person in the final game that we know for certain was meant to reside in Sutch at one point, and that is Azan, the head of Anvil's Fighters Guild. One of the quests that he gives you, the Wandering Scholar, has the following journal entry. Azan has given me a contract to escort Elanti of Alenor, a scholar doing research on Daedra. I am to meet her at the entrance to Brittle Rock Cave, northeast of Sutch, and protect her while she explores inside. Of course, this isn't any definitive proof, but it is odd that Sutch gets mentioned here. But the next journal entry from a later Fighters Guild quest known as Mystery at Harlan's Watch is what I would call definitive proof. It reads as follows. Burst Grokash has paid me the balance of the contract. He tells me that he has no further contracts to offer, but I should speak with Azan and Sutch if I have not already. This basically confirms it. Azan was apparently meant to be a Fighters Guild head in Sutch, rather than Anvil. It's possible that other NPCs were similarly moved, but there's no definitive proof for any of them. Something that's also interesting about Azan is that he basically has a default Redguard phase, so it seems that Bethesda really just forgot about finishing him, due to the whole transport business. We can also make an educated guess that since every divine has a chapel in the final game, Sutch would probably have a chapel of Kinneret, since she's the only divine that doesn't get represented in the final game. Whichever inconsistent name the temple would have had, you can choose for yourself. And with that, all the Sutch related stuff has been covered, but I want to take just one last look at a point of interest. Remember Brina Cross being marked on the original map? Well, this likely referred to a crossroads formed by roads from Sutch, Kvatch and Anvil. In the final game we have the Brina Cross Inn, which is a weird hodgepodge of content. And if Skyrim has taught me anything, it's that places like this hold a lot of removed content. Sadly, as far as I know, there's nothing left over if that really was the case. And that's basically everything there is to tell about the early Oblivion map shown at E3 and of course the lost city of Sutch. Please leave any feedback or topic suggestions in the comments below and I'll see you next time.